Well, good morning, everybody. Today, to set up our time in God's Word, I need a little help from my friends.
He didn't fall? Inconceivable.
You keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
So here, Inigo Montoya gives one of the best movie lines that's ever been given in the history of movies. That you keep using that word, I do not think it means what you think it means. And there's a lot of verses in the Bible that I like to think of as Inigo Montoya, inconceivable verses. That you keep using that verse. I do not think it means what you think it means. And I want to talk about one of those today on Revival from the Bible. So today's Inigo Montoya inconceivable verse is 1 Corinthians 10:13, which says, "No temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man. God is faithful, and he will not let you be tempted beyond your ability. But with the temptation, he will also provide the way of escape, that you may be able to endure it." So that verse is a well-known verse. You've probably heard that verse before. And here's the thing. I think people think of that only as a comforting verse. But if all you think of when you hear that verse is, oh, that's good to know. Like, whew, no temptation has overtaken me except a common to man. We're not thinking about that verse rightly. And specifically, I guess the phrase that came to my mind when I was thinking of that inconceivable line is the first phrase. No temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man. Even specifically, that phrase in this verse, I don't think is there to encourage them. To say, hey guys, don't worry. You're not struggling with anything that anybody else isn't struggling with. That verse, I think, is there to challenge them. And I think especially the rest of the verse gets more encouraging and comforting. But that opening line, no temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man, that is there to convict you and to challenge you. Because you got to look at what comes before. Starting in verse 6, which says, "Now these things took place as examples for us, that we might not desire evil as they did." And he's talking about the Israelites in the wilderness. And he says that some of them, God wasn't pleased with them, and they were overthrown in the wilderness. And he says some were idolaters. And some were sexually immoral, and they put Christ to the test, and they grumbled. And then it's basically every time they did this, people died. This was serious. So he says, look, the Israelites did this, and look at the consequences. The Israelites did this, and look at the consequences. The Israelites did this, and look at the consequences. And oh, by the way, you're going to face the same temptations, because no temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man. And honestly, look at the verse right before. Helps us understand that opening line is a challenge. When it says, "Therefore, let anyone who thinks that he stands take heed lest he fall. No temptation has overtaken you." It's trying to humble you and say, hey, that opening line is basically saying, don't think that you're better than anybody else, because you're not. You're going to face the same temptations, and the consequences are serious. And we get to the rest of that verse, and that's when the encouragement should come in. Okay, there is a way of escape. And so you're going to be tempted today, and you need to approach it humbly and seriously. You need to realize for every temptation, failure is serious and not outside of the realm of possibility. But victory is possible, thanks to God, who provides the way of escape, who won't test us beyond what we're able. So when you think of that verse, I want you to remember failure is serious, but victory is possible. And when you think of that first phrase, I've always thought, oh, no temptation has overtaken you. That's right. Hey, I'm not struggling with anything that other people aren't going through. And I remember the sermon that helped me understand what that phrase meant in this context. And it was like, boom, light bulb going off. Wow, that's serious. I'm going to face the same temptations that the Israelites did, and failure is serious. But then when we get to the rest of the verse, victory is possible. So I hope that encourages you. And even we have some examples today. We see the end of the story of King Saul today and his struggle with fear and not trusting God. And ultimately it ends with him falling on his sword. Well, guess what? No temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man. Some of you, you're going to face the same temptations that Saul did, to please people instead of God. And the consequences are serious, but victory is possible. Or you're going to face the same temptations that we read about in Mark with this rich young ruler. Sounds to me like a rich young American. Thought he was a good person, didn't want to give up his wealth, right? You're going to face some of those same temptations. Failure is serious, but victory through Christ is possible. And then I'd encourage you to read the end of Psalm 65 today, just reminding us of even just God's faithfulness in nature and providing the harvest. You crown the year with your bounty. Your wagon tracks overflow with abundance. The pastures of the wilderness overflow. The hills gird themselves with joy. Let's put our focus on God and trust in him. So whenever you hear 1 Corinthians 10:13 again, I want you to think of it differently, especially that opening line. No temptation is overtaking you that is not common to man. Hey, that wasn't meant to be a nice little pat on the back. That was meant to be a little bit of a kick in the pants, saying, hey, don't think you're above temptation, because you're going to face the same temptations that others have failed in. But remember, while failure is serious, victory is possible because God is faithful and he will provide the way of escape. So I'm praying for you today that you take that way of escape, and that none of us even approach today arrogantly thinking, I'm not going to stumble today. No, temptation is going to be real, but so is the way of escape. Let's look for that today, and we'll see you again tomorrow on Revival from the Bible.